Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DevEd Podcast. I'm Julien, your host, and today on our panel we have Brooke Avery.
Hey, everybody.
Sam Julien.
Hello.
Mike Dane.
Hey, everyone.
The illustrious Luis Hernandez.
Hola.
And two incredibly awesome and wonderful special guests, Bonnie Brennan.
Hi.
And Samantha Brennan.
Hello.
Today, our topic is learning with challenges and differences. And we brought Sam and Bonnie on because they were involved. Samantha Brennan really was like the brain behind this big project, right?
Correct.
So They've been doing some pretty cool stuff. We'll let them talk about that, and then we'll get into the podcast. So one of you feel free to kind of lead off and talk about what you guys have been doing. Also, be sure and include an introduction of both of you and your backgrounds as well.
Okay. I guess I'll start. I'm Sam, and I am Bonnie Brennan's child component. And she has been teaching me programming since I was about 8 years old. A couple years ago, when I got into Angular, I started really struggling. A lot of Angular happens behind the scenes. There's so much magic that it was becoming kind of an issue for me in my job. But I realized, well, my mom realized actually, that I was dyslexic, and that's where my struggles were coming from. So I started a course called Angular for the Visual Learner, and that is where I am currently at, working hard on that course to teach Angular in pictures. So that is my brief introduction. Mom?
My story was basically I had been doing Angular for a long time, and I really wanted her to have some job skills, and I really wanted her to know how to program. And even if she didn't want to be a programmer, I just wanted her to be able to support herself. And so I was like, you really need to learn this. It's great. And she just wasn't really enjoying it. And I found some people just are such amazing teachers, and some people just really have a gift for it. Like now, hindsight's 20/20. Like Thomas Burleson's a really good example. Thomas Burleson's very good teacher. Dominic Elm too, super, super good teachers, because they use a lot of pictures and diagrams and things like that. And I am not dyslexic. I'm a linear learner, so I can read and learn, and I don't really have too much of a problem with that. But Sam, and when we started researching and found actually a lot, what was it, Samantha? Like 1 in 10?
1 out of 10 people.
So we found out there were 40 million American adults who are dyslexic, and only 2 million of them know that they're dyslexic. And it was weird when we were at NG Vikings that we asked them, apparently over in Europe, they screen for this in like first grade. So anyone who's dyslexic would get assistance for that. In the US, that wasn't really our experience, because you might get screened for it, but Samantha was screened for it and they said she was not dyslexic. So she didn't really get any services. And I think there were a lot of people, at least here in the US, that might not be getting any assistance, and they're just thrown into a classroom to just, read this book and figure it out. And it's pretty difficult. And it was very easy for her to do HTML and CSS because anything she changed, she could see it immediately. So she was so good at it. It was like, I didn't even hardly have to teach her, right? She saw the code and she understood it immediately. But with Angular, it's not that there's anything wrong. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Angular. I love Angular, right? That wasn't the problem. The problem is there's so much that's abstract. And I think that the dyslexic people have a hard time with abstract concepts. And really the interesting thing, I think, and I'll let Samantha tell you, is how the pictures, what was it you were saying to me this morning, Sam? It's not that she can't understand it. She can learn something just from reading it in a book, and she can understand this if you explain it to her. But it's actually retaining this and learning and remembering it later and building on these advanced concepts where a diagram or a picture so she can visualize it, right? Can you speak to that, Sam?
I think you pretty much covered it.
I'm sorry. But you were just saying that the picture actually helps you to remember it and then take all these advanced concepts and start building them, which is where the Angular for the visual learner. And then, so tell them about the little pivot that you had to do, because you started out with claymation. And how did that go?
Well, claymation, first of all, Angular is not that easy to make in pictures. So I started out with claymation thinking that it would be super easy. And actually, because what I found was that 3D was the ultimate learning material for me, which is why I started with clay. Because I can draw a picture and that really helps me a lot. But the ultimate learning material for me was 3D visuals. So I started with claymation, trying to do Angular in claymation, but it took forever, because if anybody out there knows claymation, you move an arm, you take a picture, you move a leg, you move anything and you take a picture, and it's kind of a very time-consuming process. And
Final Cut Pro, that was another one in there.
Yeah, there was also Final Cut Pro. All of the things that go along with making a course went in there all at once, and it was pretty crazy. But once I switched to 3D animation, not only was it so much faster, but it was also so much easier to work with than clay. So once I moved into...
tell you guys how proud I am as a mother to watch this child learn 3D animation and then video editing and then teach herself 3D, like all in the span of a year.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. There was a lot shoved into my brain. But it's really great. And now I get to try to teach Angular in 3D animation, which is what I'm working on. So it's been a journey, but it's really fun, because I was very confused by Angular for a really long time, but once I actually started to learn it the way that my brain wanted me to the whole time, it was very easy to understand. And once you get into stuff like interpolation and event binding, it gets a little bit more complex with the pictures. But it's going well so far. I haven't gotten into too many advanced topics yet. I'm just starting out because, like my mom said, it took a very long time to get from the very start of this to where I am now actually being able to put out episodes. That took a very long time. But now that I'm here, it's going very well, and it's really great.
You're doing such a good job. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
So probably one of the questions was like how to assess it. Like, how do you know if you're dyslexic?
That's a very good question. Well, we could do the cake test if you want to.
Oh my gosh, the cake test? Yes, please. I will volunteer for the cake test.
I was going to say, we need a volunteer.
You had me at cake.
Okay, so this test, it's called the cake test. I learned it, so I spent a week in Fort Worth with a dyslexic specialist who essentially taught me how I learn. It was the most amazing week of my entire life.
And shout out to Ron Davis, who wrote a book called The Gift of Dyslexia. So if you're following along and you're interested in this topic, you need to check out that book, The Gift of Dyslexia by Ron Davis, which is where her journey kind of started.
It's kind of funny reading a book to learn about dyslexia. It's a really, really good book, and I felt it in my heart. It was a very good book. And if you read this book and you connect with it, then, I mean, that's really the only test you need. You'll be able to tell right off the bat if you are dyslexic or if you're not dyslexic based on reading this book. But
and one of the things you mentioned in Copenhagen was that a lot of people have a misconception about what dyslexia is, that like a lot of people think that it's just like transposing letters.
That's why she went undiagnosed all those years.
Yeah, I just remember like 90s TV shows talking about dyslexia, and it was just like transposing letters, and
That's why I didn't know that I was dyslexic, because that's exactly what I thought dyslexia was for most of my life up until I was 17. And what I learned was that that's only a small part of dyslexia. Dyslexia can mean something different for everyone, not to mention something called dysgraphia, which is dyslexia for numbers. And then there's also dyslexia for writing. There's all kinds of dyslexia, and it's different for every person. But for me, personally, it was not moving the letters around. I personally didn't really struggle with that at all. The letters stayed where they were supposed to be, but once I read something, I could read it over and over again, and it just would not make sense in my brain. The letters, the words would not work together in a cohesive way to form a sentence. And beyond that, I couldn't remember. Even if I did understand what I was reading, I couldn't remember concepts a week or 2 weeks later. They just disappeared from my head, and I'd have to learn it all over again like I was learning from scratch.
So basically, dyslexia would be, I guess, a very broad term that refers to somebody who has difficulties reading, but who does not have like any intellectual, like they're very smart, but it's just a reading issue.
Dyslexia does not affect general intelligence, but dyslexia is difficulty in learning to read, write, or interpret words, letters, and other symbols. That's Google's definition. I actually have it memorized.
And the problem is that a lot of people don't get help. They don't know. And really, they just think that they're not smart. And that's the frustrating thing, is that they actually are really smart. And once they find the tools that they need to work with this, and like once she went and spent some time with this dyslexia specialist, she's been unstoppable since then. And now she's able to accomplish all these things. But Samantha, Joe's waiting for his cake.
I am waiting for my cake. Oh, my cake.
One more thing for the cake. I just want to say that it's almost like dyslexics are smart in a different way than sequential thinkers, is what, the general population is called. But
which is really what the cake test illustrates.
Yes. For a dyslexic, this leads me right to where I need to go. So, dyslexia, what makes a dyslexic an amazing program?
Cake test.
Okay, fine. Okay.
And then tell us after the cake test.
Yes. Okay. Good job. See, this is why everybody needs a mother. Okay. So, Joe Eames.
Okay.
We are going to be doing the cake test on you. Do you at all consider yourself a visual learner? Have you had anything with dyslexia in your past, in your life?
Not that I could think of.
No? Okay. So
if there's anyone on the panel who thinks they might be dyslexic as they're listening, let us know.
Yes, that would be a great person to do this test on.
Because I do not think Joe Eames is dyslexic.
But
let's do the cake test and see a non-dyslexic.
Yeah, there we go. Because I don't think that Joe Eames is a dyslexic, but maybe we do the test with him and then we do the test with me and we kind of see the difference.
Because we've never done the cake test on a non-dyslexic person.
Really?
That's how it does, yeah.
Yeah. First time. This test can be done on anyone, and it can also be given by anyone. So if anybody listening thinks that they might know anybody who has dyslexia, then they should try doing this test with them. But it is called the cake test for a reason. It will make you hungry. So prepare for wanting cake. Okay. So Joe Eames, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. So what you're going to do is put your hand out in front of you.
Either one?
Either one.
Okay. Nobody can see me but me. Close my eyes?
Close your eyes. You got to trust me. Okay. Now picture a plate on your hand. Can you do that? Let me know when it's there.
I got it.
Okay. Describe the plate.
It's white. It's got a small rim on the edge that's maybe half the diameter or half the radius. That's a raised edge. It's porcelain or some kind of ceramic plate. It's got a bottom of it is an inner ridge that's got a rough edge to it, and it's about the diameter of my hand. But the plate itself is about 30-40% larger than the diameter of my hand.
Okay.
And it's got picture of Sam Brennan's face right on the top of it in the center.
I love it. That's my kind of plate.
All right.
Okay. So on top of my face, put a piece of cake, a piece of triangle cake, right on top.
That is the best phrase I've heard all day long. Okay, a triangle piece of cake?
A triangle piece of cake.
Okay.
On top of my face. Okay.
Yep.
Tell me which way it's pointing.
It's pointing towards my left shoulder.
Okay. So describe this cake to me from where your mind's eye is inside your head.
Okay. So the top point where the thinnest edge of it is near me, it's almost pointing just a little bit off to my left. And then the triangle goes from there all the way back. Nice dark chocolate frosting. Then from the front point going directly down is just nice cake. And then halfway through it is a layer of frosting. It goes directly down straight. And then there's another, cuts back a little bit again and makes that, like parallelogram type shape. I can't see the far side of it, but I can see the top and then the near side of it.
Okay. So, be right back. Need to go get some cake. Yeah, I understand.
It's moist. It's got crumbs. It was made by a French person who studied for 30 years at the top of Mount Everest.
We have another half hour on the show. We're all here for another half hour, so let's just get through this. And we should have done the cake just at the end.
Yeah.
And making me want some cake. Okay, so Joey, you can open your eyes for a second, and you are going to take your mind's eye from where it is in your head and move it to the other side of the plate.
Okay.
If this is an audio podcast, so she's holding her head right, and so her fingers like right. So you're looking at it from your forehead. And what you want to do is take your mental eyeball out of your head and move it to the other side of the cake and describe it from the other side.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes, and describe it.
And describe it. Oh, geez. That's really hard. Like, describing it from the other side.
Okay, can we flip it, and Samantha? Because this is where really the dyslexics shine.
Yes.
And you can.
Joe, you did such a good job of not being a dyslexic. You showed it.
Okay, Samantha, can you do it from the other side? Can you give us a description of Joe's cake from the other side?
Okay. It was a very complex cake, so I'm just gonna rock on because I don't know. You lost me at
Let us see your cake.
Okay.
What does your cake look like from the other side?
So from the other side, I'll point it the same way that his was pointing. From the other side, mine today is a blueberry cheesecake. So the back is crusted, so now I can see the back of it. There's this beautiful golden brown crust, and it's all down the back. So when you take a bite, and it's all the stuff, on the bottom. They put it on the back this time, so it's like a pie, but it's cheesecake. I don't know if that made sense. Okay, anyway. Now on the top, there's blueberries with the blueberry juice going down the side. You know how they bake them and then...
I really hope there's nobody listening who's hungry because they're dying right now.
Yep.
This is like almost torture.
All my fellow keto listeners are over here dying.
I'm going to report you guys to the Geneva Convention for torture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Torture.
Okay, Sam, stop describing the cake and tell us what the results of the cake test are because you're killing us here.
I'm sorry. So the cake test does a very, as you can see, it's very clear that kind of blew my mind because I've never actually done it with somebody who is not dyslexic. So that was very cool to see.
You did a good job, Joe. What's the deal with the mind's eye? What is that all about?
Yeah. So a dyslexic is able to move their mind's eye around objects, not just physical. They're able to move their mind's eye around issues in their head and see it from all angles, which is where I was saying that a dyslexic is a really good programmer, a really good problem solver, I should say, because a dyslexic is able to move their mind's eye around issues and get creative solutions. That's really where a dyslexic shines, is creative solutions. That's what we're really, really good at. And that's where a dyslexic would make a very good programmer. Maybe not an Angular because it's so opinionated and there's a right and wrong way. So creative solutions may not always be the right way, but that's where a dyslexic is very, very good at moving their mind's eye around things, which is where we saw that Joe, it was really hard for him to move because he was great at describing it in a picture until he had to move his mind's eye.
Yeah, I was thinking, I could rotate you want me to rotate? I'll rotate the cake, but move my mind's eye, no, that's...
Yeah, we are able to take it out of our head. That's our superpower. We can, one time I was really tired and we were driving in the car and I was looking up and there was a bird flying over our sunroof and I accidentally, this was during my week with Kelly, my brain was overloaded and I moved my mind's eye into the bird and I saw me looking down from the bird. My mind was so tired from all of this dyslexia for a week that I just got I really learned a lot about how to move your mind's eye. And as a dyslexic, it comes so naturally to us.
Isn't that the same thing that, mind's eye into the bird? Isn't that the same thing that happens when you're really high on drugs? Because, I'm not trying to...
I was there in the car that day. She was not high on drugs. I can attest to that.
We need somebody on the panel who can give us... I don't see anybody here today that may know. Maybe on another week there would be some...
Yeah, I guess...
This is going to sound like a really random question, but have you ever learned how to tie different knots?
I have not.
So I've done a lot of wilderness outdoor survival training stuff.
I believe that.
And I remember at one of the classes they were teaching us how to tie different knots for hitches and lashing and stuff like that. And I had the absolute hardest time learning to tie the knot, watching them teach how to tie the knots because I don't learn that way. But it just occurred to me as you were doing the cake test, I bet for you would have a really easy time being able to look at a knot from different angles and basically reverse engineer it in your head. And you might be a really cool hobby for you. It sounds really dorky, but I think you should look into it because it comes in handy, especially if you're going to be traveling a lot. But that just made me think of it because I'm more of like a tactile learner. And so I had to like look at step-by-step instructions and like follow them in a linear way to understand it. And then I had to do it like 1,500 times in order to like actually get it. But I bet for you would be able to just like visually rotate your mind around the knot and be able to understand it, which I think is really awesome.
Well, I have had to untangle my fair share of slim necklaces, kind of similar to that, where I can look at a very small, it doesn't have to be small, but I can look at a knot and try and figure out how to untangle it. So I think it's kind of the same concept, but yes, that is actually
basically
easy. Yeah. Untangling something that's tangled is very easy because I just look at it and I'm like, okay, you're absolutely right. For me, that's very
cool.
easy. But every dyslexic is different, and dyslexia literally means something different to everybody. Speaking of dyslexia, something that is really, really important, something that Ron Davis made a big deal about in his book is, I talked about we do everything in pictures. I guess I didn't actually. We learn in pictures. We think in pictures. We live our lives in pictures. That's how a dyslexic, you saw from the cake test, visualizing is very, very important to a dyslexic. That's exactly what Sam was talking about. Learning, as a dyslexic, we learn in pictures. And that's what Kelly spent a week teaching me, is how to transform words into pictures and how to understand them. And one of the things that her and Ron Davis, who wrote the book, talks about is a trigger word. That is what we call it when we don't have a picture. So a trigger word is any word or phrase that doesn't have an obvious picture attached to it, like cat or elephant or table have very clear images in your head. They're very easy to pull up, but something like express, you don't have a picture for that. Like there's no clear picture in your head for the word like them, or, well, that might have a clear picture, but are, A-R-E. Like what would your picture be for that? So a trigger word in your head. What?
I thought it was really interesting that the trigger words, because it doesn't, and this is really something that surprised me, it doesn't matter if it's a big, long word or a short word. Like I would think, cat, dog, but even the word like elephant would be really easy for a dyslexic person to read because elephant has a clear picture, even though it's a big word, or even hippopotamus would be easy for them to read.
Photosynthesis.
But then, yeah, because it has a picture. So it doesn't matter if it's a big word. If it has a picture, it's very easy for them. But the word the, which is such a little word, right? It's such a basic word, but there's no picture. And so they would stumble over that, or even something like the word almost. There's no picture, so they would stumble over that. It doesn't, and I would think the longer words would be more difficult, but that's not it.
When I'm reading, it's like those trigger words, like the or any of those words that don't have a picture, they just basically disappear from the sentence. It's like they're not even there. So if I said, the cat jumped over the dog, I would read that sentence, cat jumped dog. And that's not exactly the sentence, but my mind erases all of the words that it doesn't have a picture for. Does that make sense?
So now when you went to spend a week with Kelly, then what she taught you, and I'm kind of summarizing because we're running out of time, but what she taught you was that you would take the clay and make a picture of that trigger word, and then your brain basically takes a snapshot of it, and every time you see it, then once you read that, so you have a picture for it, it's no longer a trigger word and you no longer have that empty spot. And so then once you've defined each trigger word with a picture, which there are like 200 basic common trigger words that are common trigger words for everyone, then once you've defined all those trigger words, then you basically read just like everybody else, like a normal person, and you don't have that challenge and you can just read everything. So then when it comes to Angular, then there are Angular specific words like interpolation, like services or injection, right? Then what you have to do is kind of make those words in pictures, which is what you're working on in your course.
Yes, it is.
And once you have the picture, then you can build on those advanced concepts. And I think that's really where Samantha came home from Fort Worth, super, super excited, because she was like, oh my God, I really can learn everything. I just need this picture. And then once she has the picture, then she's unstoppable at that point.
Yes. I tried to quit my job as a developer because I was convinced that I couldn't learn. I was not smart enough to be a developer. I was not as smart as the people around me. Especially at conferences, it seemed like everybody around me was just understanding and I wasn't.
No, we all think that, Sam.
When I got home, I realized it was this huge epiphany that I absolutely could learn. I just needed pictures to learn. And once I had those pictures, it was very easy for me. But the problem was finding those pictures online was a very big challenge when I first got home. And that's where Angular for the Visual Learner was born. And I think one of the questions for this episode was how to compensate for visual challenges. And this question, it means a lot to me because I really want to say thank you and a big shout out to the people in the community, because that has seriously been the absolute best resource for me. When I struggle to find things online, the community is very, very helpful, and anybody is willing to jump on a hangout with me and explain it in pictures. And what everybody has found is it's actually kind of fun learning in pictures and coming up with these analogies to explain these abstract concepts in analogies that you can relate to your everyday life, and coming up with them is a lot easier than one would expect.
Stephen Flynn is very good at this. And John Rista over at Rebug is like totally
are very good at this. It's so exciting learning this and actually understanding it for the first time, because the community has taken the time to teach me the way that I need to learn. And that is the best thing on this whole journey so far, is the people that are willing and that are excited to help me learn is absolutely, hands down, the coolest thing about this project so far.
I saw a question about third-party tools, and I wanted you to talk for a minute about Jeff Welpley. What's Jeff Welpley? Shout out to Jeff Welpley and Maddie, by the way. Hi, Maddie.
Yes, they are doing some really cool stuff. In their talk in Copenhagen, they were talking about NG Club, how to teach kids to code. And they started with Scratch, which if anybody is familiar with that, it's coding, but it's for kids. It's basically in pictures. You can code in little blocks, and then it translates to watching what your little character is doing with the code that you just wrote, if that makes sense. And one of the challenges that they ran into, which is a challenge that I am personally running into, is it's really easy to define these trigger words in pictures, and it's very easy to grasp these concepts. But when I move into the code, it's a different story, and that's the number one challenge that I've been facing in learning visually, is how do I translate those concepts that I'm learning into code? And I've been really struggling with this. And when I went to Copenhagen and I saw Jeff and Maddie's talk, it was a light bulb. And it was awesome. And I wish Jeff was here to talk about this, but I'll have to brag about them myself. They talked about something called Blockly. And I haven't personally used it yet, but I am very excited to. It's where I wish he was here. You can code, and then it translates the code into, no.
It's like a drag and drop WYSIWYG almost. It's like you take these snippets of code and you can drag something into your interface. It's kind of like Scratch, but you can extend Scratch, and it's a kind of a library that allows you to build your own Scratch. Is that a good?
I think that was pretty good. It's I think you would really have to see it to really understand what exactly Blockly does. But it's a Chrome extension, I believe, or maybe it's a VS Code extension. I'm sorry. I should have done a little bit more research on that.
It's Blockly. You can go to developers.google.com/Blockly and find out more about that.
Yes.
A library that adds a visual code editor to web and mobile apps.
That, I would say, would be the number one third-party tool that would help with challenges, because that's something, and I'm still working on the basic concepts of Angular and of TypeScript, but once I get there, once I start transitioning into actually writing the code, once I have some of the basic concepts, that is going to be the number one helping thing, because that actually helps you translate the concepts into the code, which is a barrier that I think a lot of people have been facing.
She cracks me up because she started on this journey, and then there was a quick detour while she learned stop motion animation and video editing, and then, oh yeah, let's throw in 3D animation while we're at it. And now she's back on the original path of Angular for the visual learner. But now it's 3D, and it's very cool.
I think so. I've worked hard. It's fun.
That's very cool.
One of the things I really liked in your Copenhagen talk was how you talked about how changing tutorials for visual learners also benefits non-dyslexic people. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think you guys should talk about that. From the point of view of somebody who's not dyslexic, how do pictures help you understand? Because I absolutely agree. And there are studies that were done by Dyslexia International in classrooms. And it shows that the pictures used to teach dyslexics helped everybody learn how to read in the classroom. Not only the dyslexics, every student in the classroom benefited from the pictures that were used for the dyslexics. I asked in my talk, do you guys agree? Do pictures help you guys learn more than a wall of text? Everybody in the room raised their hand, everyone. So this would be a great place for somebody else to chime in who's not dyslexic. Do pictures help you?
I think that's a tough question to answer. Sometimes I feel like they do, but a lot of times I don't feel like I desperately need pictures myself.
It speaks a lot, though, to research that's been out for decades. I mean, there are different learning styles. I think there's 8 different learning styles that have been found, and there could even be more by now. But the point is that everybody learns uniquely in different ways, and some people might be visual, some people might do better reading text. Other people, like Sam was saying, need to actually touch it and feel it, manipulate it. I think, though, that what's important is that, like what Sam has done, is that she's become self-aware. And that's not just unique to dyslexia, but it's something that all learners need to do, because when you become aware of your strengths, just like Sam has, and your weaknesses, then you can make a plan and you can start to come up with strategies for yourself on how you can learn something. But it starts with that self-awareness. And you really have to identify, and I really liked what Sam said, it was her superpower. I think a lot of people can very easily get down on themselves when learning gets hard, whether they have a diagnosed, learning disability or learning struggle, learning challenge or not. It's pretty easy to get down on yourself. But if you can just accept that, I have this challenge, but I can still value myself, and then flip that like Sam has done and say, this is my superpower. Look at my strengths, and then play to those strengths. And let those be the things that drive your education. How can my strengths push me forward to making advancement? How can I learn with those strengths in spite of my challenges? But, I think it really is, everybody learns in different ways. And I do think a lot of people are visual, but not only visual. I think you have different learning styles for different situations.
That was such a good.
If
my book was a jacket, I would want you to write the. If my life was a book, I would want you to write the jacket, because that was a really good summary.
The one thing that I really wanted to get across in all of my talks, and what you just, I think, really encompassed was, yes, it was beautiful, is that everybody does learn in a different way, and everybody probably has their own unique way that they learn that's different from everybody else. And that unique thing that every person has that helps them learn, I'm willing to bet that it will help somebody else learn too. And I think what they do when they realize that maybe that they have something different about them and they learn differently, is they want to maybe hide it. And I'm speaking from experience here. For most of my life, I knew that there was something different about me than there was about my peers in the classroom, and I tried to hide it. And if I hadn't tried to hide it, I might have known other people that were going through the same thing. If I had said anything about it, and I didn't, I said nothing about it. I tried very hard. I hid it from my family, from my friends, from everybody. It took me so long to read a book. I didn't want anybody to know how hard it was for me to understand with these reading materials, which is all they give you in school. And the one thing that I really wanted to get across was the way that you learn that's different, I believe will help somebody else. So if you have a different way of explaining it, whatever that different way is, you should absolutely share it because somebody else in the world will benefit. And for me, when I realized that I needed pictures to learn, I went to the internet and I was fresh out of luck because there were just about none online. So I was really struggling with that. And now that I've started talking about it and started telling people this is something that I actually need to learn, I've had so many of my friends that have really made an effort to put pictures into their articles and stuff. And it's amazing. And I just really want to say, if you have a different way of learning or teaching, you should absolutely share it because somebody else will benefit from it. I promise.
If something helps you remember, especially for anybody who's listening now that you know that Sam's working on this course, if there's any picture that relates or analogies are really good for her, anything that specifically, because she's just getting into the Angular concepts, but then there's so much, I mean, we haven't even started on NGRX. I mean, don't even, that's a long ways to go. So that's why it's really kind of starting to become a community thing where if there are other dyslexic programmers, like let's all, well, not me, I'm not a dyslexic programmer, but there have to be more out there. And those are where we want to join forces. So you basically picked the hardest possible career.
No, you picked the hardest possible career for me.
I know, I'm sorry. I just wanted her to have job skills.
Well, hey, it's turned out to be a really fun adventure. So
you got tenacity anyway.
So there's something else there that I think is important that you guys are kind of touching on too, is that U.S. schools aren't quite equipped to meet the needs of students with challenges. And it's not because teachers don't want to help, but it really comes down to a lack of funding and being able to have, teacher aides and other people who can come in and help these students. But the point I really want to make here is not the fact that I think is a challenge for United States schools, but that we need to be proactive in finding solutions for our children and for ourselves when we become adult learners. So I'm curious, for our panelists here, have any of you others had any challenges with learning, and what have you done, or even when you were younger, maybe what did your parents do to help you to overcome those challenges, especially with development?
And I just wanted to slide in a quick comment there, Brooke, because that's really very important what you said. And you know what, I think a lot of things with the U.S. school system, and it's not the U.S., like I don't want to bag on the U.S., don't get me started, right? But the big thing that we don't have that we used to have a long time ago that I think really makes this whole dyslexic thing more difficult is we don't have apprenticeships like we used to. Like you used to maybe be a seamstress or a baker or a blacksmith apprentice. And if you were learning in that way, you wouldn't even know you were dyslexic, because a lot of people 50 years ago, many working adults didn't read because they didn't ever need to, because they learned a blacksmith from their mentor. And now it's just all classroom, read this from a book and learn. And so there's not that hands-on training anymore. And I think that's really where the dyslexic people are completely getting left behind.
I truly believe it was a lack of awareness. I do think it was funding. I absolutely think it was funding, but I think it was more about awareness, because I don't think my teachers, I made it pretty clear in my classrooms that I didn't like to read out loud, that I didn't want to be called on for any type of reading, anything like that. I talked to my teachers privately that I don't call on me. I only do audiobooks exclusively. I will only read from an audiobook if you assign something to the class. And none of my teachers in all of my school years said anything about it.
That her teachers were okay with her saying, no, I don't want to read out loud. And all those years, the teachers were like, okay, we'll just skip over you. And nobody seemed to mind that because she didn't have behavior problems. She was such a good girl that they were okay just ignoring her and letting her struggle, because she wasn't really, asking. She was doing the work. She was getting good grades. And so basically, as far as what we've seen in the United States, you're not really going to get services or any help for this unless you literally can't read at all. So if you're smart enough to kind of just fake your way through it like Samantha did, then you're going to be struggling and you're not going to get any help, which is probably because dyslexic people are smart. So you could actually pass your schoolwork and get away with it. But if you try to go into something like Angular, you're just really, it's not a good situation.
So Louise and Mike and Sam, Julien, have you guys had any learning challenges that you could kind of speak to here? And especially with development, has there been anything that's been a barrier for your learning development, and what have you done to overcome that?
One thing for me has always been data structures. For me, that's always been confusing. I've never been able to fully understand trees, stacks, queues, linked lists, all that. It's always been really confusing. And so what I actually ended up doing is just finding there's a lot of programs online that will visualize the data structures and then even certain algorithms. So inserting into a linked list or popping from a stack or, putting something into a queue, it'll visualize all of those things. And for me, that's an area where I think I was really only able to learn it and understand it through visualizations. So I think there are certain areas in just programming, there's certain topics that are better able to be visualized than not. And for me, that was definitely one of them.
It's really hard for me too.
Sam or Louise, do you have anything?
Not really, but for me, what I find is that I get crowded when I have too many things coming at me at the same time. So I have this analogy of, signal to noise ratio. And I employ that when I'm teaching. I try to remove as much of the stuff that is not necessary for the core concept that I'm trying to teach, because I get overwhelmed. So I guess other people might too. And it helps me. I don't know if it's about picture. For me, it's more about diagrams. It's more about being able to kind of step up a little bit and see how things come together, even if I don't know the details first. Understand the high level concept of how everything comes together. And then I go down on a particular, and I zoom in a particular part, and then I concentrate only on that part, removing everything else. But it definitely helps me. And again, I also benefit a lot from people explaining something at a high level to me. Okay, Luis, this is how it works. You have this part, this thing. I don't need to understand how they work. I just need to understand how they come together in order to have the solution, and then I could go and focus on a single piece of it. But again, I don't know if this is related to what we're talking about.
No, I completely agree with you. I really like to have scratch paper when I'm thinking about architecture stuff and kind of data. I really want to draw it on I actually always keep paper at my desk, and I want to scribble it or just kind of draw it just for my own brain to kind of think about how this is all going to come together and how it's going to work. I think that's such an important step.
So, Louise, you mentioned something really important there, that one thing you have to kind of do is manage your environment. And that is a real strategy that is used with learning challenges. And again, you became self-aware of something that was, a barrier to your learning. And then you created a plan that was just managing your environment and finding ways to kind of block out things that were too distracting or that cut into your learning. Something else, though, that you kind of touched on was that another strategy would be to find a support system. So, and Sam also was mentioning this, that she found other people who she says she can easily reach out to, and they're so happy to help her. But finding and building for yourself that support system is so important, because without that, then you really are, like Sam was saying, you kind of hole yourself into this place where you're just sort of isolated and you're suffering alone. But if you can reach out to people and just be like, what the heck? Who cares? I've got this challenge and it's just part of me, but I need help. And you're willing to help me and let people do that. People love to share. They love to, connect with you. And it's really important to build that community around you, that support system.
Yeah. And to talk to this, if you don't have it, in my case, my second best is videos. This is why normally when I have to learn something new, I default to first go and watch a good video from some instructor. I will go slow and have that ability to share the knowledge. And then once I get that simple introduction from someone explaining it to me in a video, then I could easily dig into the documentation and learn more about it and build stuff with it. But that first step of having someone kind of walk me through the high level concepts, for me, it's without that, I have a hard time learning anything.
I'm sort of a hodgepodge of different learning styles, but I think what wins out, like I mentioned earlier, is being like a tactile learner. So with code, I have to actually build something in order to fully understand it. Like reading the docs really helps me more than most things, and then visual diagrams and things like that. But building something, like I've been doing a bunch of research on Angular elements for this Denver talk, and I've probably read everything and watched everything, but it was really like building the code where it all started to come together for me.
Isn't that how it always works?
Does for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, I learned by doing. I think we're the same on that, because I have to actually do it to learn it. I can watch a Pluralsight video, Joe Eames Pluralsight videos, and it all makes sense. And
Never heard of him.
I really have to then follow along and actually do that code myself while I put him on one screen and I'm on the other screen doing it together. Then it clicks in my head and I can remember it. But if I just watch the video and I'm not trying to follow along, it's not. I have to do it, right? And then once I do it, I'm like, unit testing is easy.
I'm sitting here realizing too, and this was an episode that was just released a couple of weeks ago, but every single one of you in one way or another is a teacher of web development. And I think that is such an important thing for people with learning challenges, because it's forcing them to recall what they've learned themselves. But I think what happens is that because they have that learning challenge, they don't have that confidence to go and share it with other people. They feel like, I don't know this. I can't share it with anybody. When in reality, actually going and teaching it to someone else is one of the best things that you can do, because it's making you recall it in a way that you have to internalize it and process it deeply. So I find that very interesting, though, that every single one of you not just learns web development, but you have some way, taught it in conferences, or Mike with his Giraffe Academy online. And I think that's an important thing to observe here.
Something that my mom always says, which I really agree with and I really love, is sometimes beginners are the best teachers, because people who are really comfortable with the subject sometimes forget how basic, you need to go for somebody who's just starting out. And as a beginner, you are able to explain it as somebody, and you can say, this was a problem that I faced and this is how I solved it. And sometimes people who have been looking at something for a really long time, they forget about the beginner concepts and they teach on a very high level. So sometimes a beginner is the best teacher, and also the best way to learn is to teach. Absolutely, hands down.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember when I was in college, having these PhDs who were teaching these beginner concepts like if statements and for loops, and they're just way overcomplicating them. You know what I mean? It's like, this person is obviously really smart. They know what they're talking about, but they can't relate to a beginner. And so anytime I'm teaching, I think it's always good to keep in mind, like, you need to empathize with your audience. That PhD level explanation is good if you already know what you're doing. But if you're just starting out, then, it needs to be more basic and down to earth.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, around Auth0, there's a phrase called the curse of knowledge that it's from a book. It's actually from a book called Made to Stick. That's a really good book. But we talk about that a lot with like identity concepts and authentication, where once you know a lot about a subject, it becomes really difficult to explain it to new people, because you've sort of forgotten about all the rough edges and obscure, weird things that you experience when you're a beginner at something. So you always have to try to remember to put yourself back in that mindset.
There's an Einstein quote that actually speaks very directly to what you and Mike just said. It basically says, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So there's a real art to being able to describe something easily enough for a child to understand it. And when you can do that, I think that really shows your true depth of understanding on that subject.
Thomas Burleson is very good at that, because he can take some really advanced concepts and break them down to make them very, very simple.
Well, this has been a really crazy fun. I really had a really great time talking about all this stuff. This is Normally we just kind of like go through a bunch of questions and talk about ideas, but this has been a really cool conversation, and I felt like I learned a ton, and I really enjoyed. That was really quite fun doing the cake test and getting some exposure to that. So
doesn't know this; they can't see your your video, but he was literally licking his lips as he was describing the cake.
Was it really?
You were. You were talking about the chocolate, and then you were licking your lips. I was like, "Oh man, it really did make him hungry."
I think he gained a pound or two.
I might have. I got a cavity just from thinking about all that sugar.
We all need to go get some cake.
Yeah.
So I think, as always, it's really fun to talk with you two and your bright, fun personalities. So thank you so much for taking time to come and be on the podcast and talk about a really interesting, fascinating subject and, helping spawn this conversation. And let's maybe move in now to our final phase where we go through and talk about what would you tell a friend? Something you would tell a friend. Sam, are you up for starting?
I could start and give them a second because I have one ready.
Oh,
Yeah,
all right, go.
We just talked a little bit about Jeff Welpley and his awesome daughter, Maddie, who started NG Club. And they actually have an app that you could use right now. And it's very cool. And you can go to ngclub.info. If you have any interest in teaching elementary school kids how to code, it's really a great resource. It's a lot of fun. It's super free, ngclub.info.
And they have a YouTube video about Blockly, what I was struggling to explain. They have a YouTube video where Maddie and Jeff explain it. So that would be great to check out.
They actually started a coding club at Maddie's school. I think Maddie was 8. I think she's 9 now. And what they're doing is Jeff is actually putting lessons for his club in there so that you can actually start your own NG club. And he's sharing his curriculum, and it's amazing. And he's such a wonderful person. So that's all at ngclub.info. There's a link to the YouTube. There's more information about Blockly. There's everything. That's my pick.
Awesome.
Harry Sam?
Oh, man.
Can we just keep that name for him forever?
Harry Sam.
Harry Sam.
It's something. Somebody go next. I'm having a hard time thinking this time.
So mine is it's a JavaScript library called P5.js. It's based off this Java project called processing. And it's kind of like almost the opposite of what we're talking about. So we've been talking about learning by visualizing. And this is a library that makes it really easy to visualize the code that you write. So it's essentially just like a game engine / graphics engine. And it's just really easy to create animations, create complex designs and things just with JavaScript. So it's something to check out if you're a visual learner and you want to be able to visualize the code that you're writing.
What was that called? So I can write it down.
It's called P5.js. And there's a YouTube channel called The Coding Train, which has a bunch of tutorials on it.
That's awesome. I'm happy to go next.
Okay, go. Go, Sam.
My pick is Angular Denver. It is coming up in August, next month. It's going to be amazing. I think almost all of us are going to be there. Almost all of us on here. I think the majority will be there. There's amazing speakers, amazing sessions, and I know that the Angular Fundamentals workshop that's going to be there is making a dedicated effort to add more pictures to their curriculum. I know because I'm part of that help there. So it's going to be an amazing workshop. It's going to be an amazing conference. So if you want to check that out, I think it's Angular. Does anybody know the
AngularDenver.com.
AngularDenver.com. There you go. That is hands down what I am promoting today.
Awesome. Brooke, are you up to do yours next?
Yeah. So today and yesterday, Joe and I put on our first ever Thinkster workshop. It was a live workshop online, and it was really fun. But something that you'll hear me talk a lot about from the education side of things is that when you're doing some hard learning like that, it's super important to always take a break. I think sometimes we feel like we have to just marathon it through something that's hard, but it's really important to take breaks and give yourself a chance to kind of absorb everything you're learning. So one thing that we did was get on a website called Kahoot. And it's like a customizable game that you go in. You can make these multiple choice games or a true and false game, but You sign up for your account and you can make all sorts of games, make them trivia, make them, for whatever purpose that you have. It could be like we did with our workshop, or it could be for a children's classroom, or for a larger conference, whatever. But it's just a really fun website. You make the game and then you get a special game code every time you log in to play that game. And anybody who's there gets on their tablet or their smartphone, they put in the code, and then they've joined it, and they'll have to see the questions from your computer, but then they have their multiple choice, and they can all, jump in, and whoever not only answers the question correctly, but also the fastest, you get points on it. So it's just a fun game to use if you're ever doing like training at your office or something. But Kahoot. So, and I think it's kahoot.it, and it's KAHOOT.IT.
Of all podcasts for you to bring up Kahoot, this is the one, because Sam and Bonnie are like,
we're big fans.
Like
We actually sometimes put Kahoots at the end of our conference talks. Nice. So you have to listen to our talk to get the answers to the quiz at the end, and then you win a prize at the end from the Kahoot. I never met you before, Brooke, but I've decided I really like you because I just think you're very insightful and fun. And
you guys are birds of a feather, that's for sure.
Huh?
You're birds of a feather.
Yeah, you're pretty cool people, Brooke. I like you.
Well, thank you. I knew we would want you on the show, so likewise.
All right, Luis, what about you?
So much visual stuff, so I'm gonna go on one of the other senses. There is this website. If you go to coderadio.freecodecamp.org and you're a developer, they have nice music that you can code to. They used to have a YouTube channel. They moved. They're kind of spinning off their platform. But so far it's been stable for me. I've been trying it out today. It's pretty nice. So coderadio.freecodecamp.org.
Very cool.
I finally thought of one, which is, it's a small one, but I've been in the middle of making a bunch of slides. So my pick is Magic Move in Keynote. We were talking about speaking and slides and stuff last week on the podcast. And if you're looking for a really cool animation thing to move visuals and text, look up the Magic Move animation in Keynote. It's pretty awesome.
Awesome. All right. I guess I'll go last then. We got everybody else. Is that right? I'm going to pick a movie. I went and saw the movie yesterday.
Yay.
And I didn't see it yesterday. I saw it last week. I saw yesterday last week. That's totally a thing. Valid sentence in this day and age. It was awesome. One of my favorite movies I've seen in a very, 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 very long time. I highly recommend it. If you're looking for a great movie to go and see, or if you listen to this after it's out on video, check it out on video. Yesterday.
Totally agree, Joe. I loved that. It was kind of funny, though, because when you go to get your tickets at the theater, the person who's handing you the tickets is like, so you're here for yesterday. And it sounds like you're going, no, I'm here today. I'm watching the movie today. But anyway, it was just kind of confusing. So I thought that was funny. But I back you 100% on that. It was a great, great movie.
Yeah, it really was. Cool. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for coming to be on the show. Thanks, Sam and Bonnie, for coming and being our special guests. Thanks to the panelists, and thanks to all the listeners. We will be back with our next episode. Peace out.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.